Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website about reimagining your life. Thanks for joining me today to talk about, well, kind of how we're looking at retirement a little bit and who's looking at it with us. So let's get started. So if you like what you hear today, please leave a like, subscribe, tell your friends, send me a message. Thanks for joining me tonight to talk about how we, as older adults, kind of define ourselves. We've talked about this before from different perspectives, but this time will be in terms of defining ourselves by our work, or more specifically, a change in or perhaps ending of formal regular work. I'd already started writing on this topic when I came across a Wall Street Journal article on the similar topic that conveniently provided some statistics. But in confirming those figures, I realized that there's currently a couple of different figures being called out in the mainstream news that don't really correlate with each other, even though they're kind of being presented in a similar manner. I found many stories on the baby boomer peak 65 in 2024, implying that this year will be the peak year of retirement. Well, that isn't really accurate because most people either retire well before 65, the average retirement age is still around 62, and the but also because the number of people in the age bracket of 60 to 75 who are still working has increased by about 6 or 7% over the last 20 years. So, yeah, there's a lot of people reaching 65, but the retirement numbers don't match that number at all. The other significant figure is that there are expected to be about 30.4 million Americans who turn 65 between the years of 2024 and 2030, which, as a point of interest, is more like 9.6 baby boomers per minute or so, well above our name of 7 every minute. So I kind of estimated low on that. And that's a lot of people who are potentially moving into a different phase of their lives. This is coupled with the well-known fact that U.S. baby boomers, more so than their following cohorts and more so than in a lot of other countries, tend to define themselves heavily by their career and their companies. Then add in that nearly two-thirds of retiring boomers are not financially prepared for retirement, and so they may have to follow much different career paths than they planned because they may need to keep working as they get older. So you can see there are some uncomfortable times potentially ahead for a lot of people in this age cohort, but not just financially, but also in terms of self-esteem and personal identity. How often have you been in a conversation with a stranger and suddenly they ask you, oh, what do you do? And now I've always worked for myself for many years, and engineering has always been kind of a part of my work one way or another. So even if it's in a minor at times, but so I always just reply, oh, I'm an engineer and a podcaster. I've never been, tied to a company I work for other than in terms of contractual relationships. And although I did work for Solar City, that was kind of interesting. That was kind of a passion project. But that's another whole story. But so I have no problem referring to myself, as by my training, even though it wasn't necessarily currently my primary job. But many people have been trained, often by their employers, to think of themselves as kind of, well, I'm a Ford person, or I'm an IBM, or whatever it is. They think of themselves very much as their career. I work in one of the big five accounting agencies, and it changes perspective of things. And I understand it provides some degree of belonging, I suppose, but I've also been fortunate to realize that although work consumes a great deal of our free time, it really should only consume a very small part of our inner being and core values, our soul, if you will. I've also been very fortunate, by virtue of being a contractor, to not have been overly put off by being unemployed. At times it got mighty inconvenient, for sure, but it was always a transient situation and not something that I equated to my own worth. Jobs come, jobs go, my inner worth remains the same. I've always tried to provide excellent quality work because my work did represent me, but I was doing it for myself and my own honor, not for a company. But again, if someone has spent many years, perhaps their entire working life, at one company, then the company becomes a much larger part of their own self-definition. Likely, most or all of their friends are there. Many of their social activities may involve people from work or some aspect of work, and it's easy to see how that happens, that you kind of become your work. And this is why it's such a challenge when suddenly, and often it is suddenly, that one cornerstone of this self-definition is completely removed. I got laid off is a very difficult phrase for someone with that mindset to say because they feel it indicates a drop in their own self-worth. I can't tell you how many times I've laughed with one of my brothers about the likelihood of an impending layoff for myself or some other separation I had during my career. Um, just as a contractor, it's part of the game, and so I never let it define me. But that was because I was able to work from a different frame of reference. The business was just a business, and my personal self worth was defined by me, not by who I worked for or what I did for a living. This is exactly why one of our themes, by the way, and very much actually it's our core theme, is about defining our vision and living to that vision. It's defining ourselves irrespective of the things immediately around us, what we work, things we like. It's stuff that really matters to us on the inside. When you live your life towards your vision, then while it may be a goal to work for this company or that company, it probably is to support a path to your vision. And your life vision probably isn't to work for some particular company, particularly as you start to refine it. And when you live towards your vision, then when circumstances change, like your career path, it's easier to adjust because your vision remains constant. But what about the people who have been, led to believe that they are what their career is or where they work? How can they adapt? This is currently a really big problem, right? We have 30.4 million people who is going to be a problem for over the next 20 years. And the answers are often, you know, the answer kind of is straightforward, like so many things in life. The answer is very simple, but that doesn't mean it's especially easy. Certainly, one of the first things to do, in my opinion, is kind of step back and do a bit of kind of, let's call it a focus reset. It's time to get perspective on life in general and your own life in particular. We've talked about this before, but the short version is start out by thinking what your life would be like if it was exactly what you wanted it to be. The first pass of that usually turns into something like, this vision of private islands, lots of money, something along those lines. But after you work on your vision for a little bit, it usually tends to move towards a more realistic and perhaps somewhat more difficult vision to attain. A better world for your kids or peers, peace amongst the different peoples of the world, ending poverty, bringing education or directly related work to the entire world's population, ending totalitarian governments, helping the old lady next door, being a caring adult to some semi-abandoned kids you see across the street. We have things from the humongous to the teeny that work into our vision. And when you step back and start to look at it, then you realize those are the things that define me as a person. Not where I worked, not what I did for a living per se, but what those things enabled me to do to support my vision. Once you really start thinking about the bigger picture, you realize the little goals like money are really pretty insignificant, except in terms, obviously, of helping you reach your bigger vision in a more effective way. It's hard to help other people if you can't pay your own rent, obviously. But once you get beyond providing for your immediate and future needs, then you enter kind of a magic realm where you're able to make significant lasting changes in the world. A special note here, none of this has involved your title, your career, your company you work for, any of those things that society says are so important. If you put JD after your name, yay, good for you, I'm glad for you. But probably your vision was defined, if you've worked on it at all, and I have some friends who have done this actually, one of them is a JD, um, that his vision of the world changes and continues to change. It evolves all the time. And I mentioned him in another episode, probably a few months ago now, and because he had some health issues and he had a forced semi-retirement and spent some time with his grandkids. And he thought, how could I be missing this? Thinking more about my career than about this. And he was saying, my wife was so much smarter than I ever gave her credit for being, because her whole focus was on the kids. And once he started getting involved in that, he realized, wow, and went back and really started looking at his whole vision overall. Because he realized that he'd kind of gotten sidetracked and focused on, and did a very good job, very well regarded in his profession. No discredit to any of that at all. But then he realized other things mattered more to him in a life sense. Those external things, and they're kind of all a product of society. Society wants to kind of divert your attention to focus on items that society controls and which benefit certain segments of society. So getting through this first step, it's a huge step because it requires you to let go of your future reference points or points and turn to a reference inside your own core meaning. Both of those things are difficult changes, but they're extremely worthwhile. And of course, society has lots of guardrails to discourage you from doing it in forms of memes, social media posts, advertising, and everything else, because we're taught to respect certain professions And there's this kind of semi-hidden scale that we all kind of learn as we grow up. It used to be things like clergy, doctors, attorneys, bankers, teachers, and so on down the line. There's this whole step of all the way down as to the most important, and we don't want to call them least important, but they're not at the most important end of the scale. And of course, COVID had something to do with that because a lot of the people on the really important end of the scale turned out they weren't so important when they needed to do things like get food. So that was kind of an interesting awakening for many people. But if you look at the many truly influential people in the world, they often don't fit anywhere on the important persons or important profession list. People like Mahatma Gandhi. I'm going to mess up this name. I have it in phonetics and I still have a difficult time saying it. Mulula Yusufzai. Uh, then Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama IV, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Thich Nhat Hanh, Ruth Adler. Many of these people either were not important people in society's sense, or are known for activities that did not intrinsically leverage their important person skills, their original profession. If you look at Wikipedia's page, for example, it lists about 670 people who were influential in various peace movements, many of whom are essentially unknown, except perhaps regionally. Now, who are the really important people here? Is it the person who heads Apple or the person who ended apartheid in Africa? Clearly, I mean, we can have certainly different opinions on that, but it's very clear to me which one really had more import in the world overall. And so the point is, be careful of letting pop culture and societal norms redefine you in a less meaningful way. Once you started reframing your own self in hopefully a more meaningful way to yourself and then to others around you, you have to start the transition to how to reframe yourself to the others because, you know, they may still define themselves and others in terms of career and superficial things like wealth. Instead of saying, I'm an engineer, say something to totally reframe the conversation. Two that I just read recently and I really liked. One was a fellow and somebody said, well, what do you do? And he goes, I rock. That was his answer. And another one said, what do you do? He says, I'm a trophy husband. And that guy, he even had a business card made up with exactly that title. It comes along the standpoint of if you can't flaunt it, I'm sorry, if you got that backwards, if you can't hide it, flaunt it. And so both these people, they may not have had careers that fit the common mold, but they didn't start off with self-deprecating statements like, oh, I used to be, or whatever. They just leap right over that and into the core of their current essence. At trade shows, when I meet people, I often ask, what's your passion? Granted, for me, in that sense, the context is that I'm often around other coaches or other influencers, but it really works well in most situations. If a person is a passionate physician, then they can just say so. I'm passionate about this. And I think I've spoken about a woman a couple of times who I went to college with. She worked on the Good Ship Hope for probably 35 years. That is her passion. And so if you said, what's your passion? She would say, healing children that have no other option. It still fits. It doesn't lock anybody out. So just next time you're in a conversation, you're about to say, what do you do? Just say, what's your passion? Gives you a whole different perspective. So now we've addressed two of the biggest issues, right? What about some more pragmatic issues of moving ahead with true personal confidence? And this comes down to kind of refreshing your perspective to focus on the skills that you still do have. Remember, this is always about what happens when you change careers at the end of your careers, either change careers, change how you are following your career. And so you have to remember that you have to keep a real perspective and confidence in all the things that you have skills in. And it's easy to think when you get laid off of some place or you retire from somewhere, it's kind of like, oh, well, I guess those skills don't matter anymore. Well, why do they stop mattering? You still have all these skills. Now you just have to reframe those skills and how to make them meaningful in your current life situation. Something like if you used to be a great welder, maybe you look at being a great welding instructor or a shop teacher. If you used to be a great executive administrator, why not work part-time at a smaller firm or teach part-time at a local community college? This isn't saying you can replace everything identically, but it is saying that you and your skills still have great value. The initial reaction for many people when their primary career ends, either voluntarily or otherwise, is that it happened because they weren't valuable. And this is very often the completely wrong assumption. Very often it's economic. If you're experienced, you're probably also in the top tier of your salary range. And so eventually, the company, they, will sort by cost and they'll go, huh, look at that. We can save a bunch of money if we let those people go. And if they aren't clever enough to realize that you have a lot of experience, they might just let you go. It's strictly economic, so stop beating yourself up. It wasn't because you were bad or whatever. Sometimes people may say you didn't, they wanted a younger look or something like that. It's difficult to say that these days. They may make up reasons to attain the same thing. But by and large, you'd be surprised how many times it's just economic, especially right now that a lot of businesses are in slowdowns. So, again, give yourself some grace and just say, whatever reason they laid me off for, a little introspection, make sure you didn't cause it yourself by, doing something totally foolish. But once you get past that, then just drop it and look forward and move ahead. Finally, all these changes take time. Maybe today you're feeling all upbeat, and tomorrow you see someone from work and they're driving a new truck and talking about the great time they had at the work golf outing. You get totally down on yourself. Try again to step back and reframe your perspective. Nothing says your buddy doesn't have an $80,000 car loan in that new truck. And remember, the golf outing was because they just got done working 60-hour weeks with no overtime because the management messed up. A great rule of thumb is to never compare yourself to others in any situation. You rarely know the whole story, and even if you did, they aren't you, so why are you measuring yourself by their standards? If you retired early to spend time with your grandkids, then say that to your friend. Yeah, I spent the weekend with the grandkids, and my granddaughter and I caught her first fish together. It's what you wanted to do, and you did it. This is, something is equally proud to be proud of as buying a new toy. The new toy is something that society says is important. The time with your grandkids is something that you know is important to yourself. Remember to give yourself grace and acknowledge your personal wins. Change is opportunity. Your goals and your wins only have to be important to you, not to your friends, not to society, just to you and to those who matter to you. So, even though the rate people entering the retirement continues to increase well beyond our name of 7 every minute, that doesn't mean we have to let that, this big possible change in life situation be a negative in your life. Remember, reframe your view on life, and get clear on your life vision. Learn to speak positively and confidently about your current situation. Remember, if you can't hide it, flaunt it. Purpose or repurpose or reframe your skills. They still have value. Don't beat yourself up if you were let go or forced into retirement. It's often economics or poor management. Don't compare yourself to others. Not now, not ever. And this goes for everybody everywhere. It's the quickest way to make yourself disappointed. First of all, if somebody looks like they're doing just too good to believe, don't believe it. It probably isn't true. And if they are, great for them. Talk to them, find out what they did. Maybe something applies to you. But that doesn't mean you failed. It's an opportunity to learn. Don't compare yourself to others. And give yourself some grace and acknowledge your own personal wins. Take advantage of the new opportunities that you have. That's it for the evening. Embrace the world, and all the learning opportunities it brings, and never lose faith in yourself. Your homework, always optional, and it's longer tonight, is to think about what would happen if you got laid off tomorrow. Think of the best parts and the most challenging parts. Try to be specific, but don't assume negative outcomes. It's super important. Do not assume negative outcomes. You want to be aware of them, but you aren't accepting them as a done deal. And tonight, you really should do the extra points section, because the extra points are, if you work through every worst outcome and work through it in detail, and then look for ways to mitigate it. It's not a race. Think about it for a few days and be open-minded. How would I pay the mortgage? Maybe get a housemate. How would I do any work at all? Learn to teach online. Everything is fair game. You're kind of brainstorming with yourself, and one of the big brainstorming rules is you can't say no to anything initially. Depending on the brainstorming session you may have been in, if you've ever done one, maybe they say for 5 minutes, 10 minutes today, you can't say anything negative till tomorrow. But it's really super important. All you're doing is gathering ideas. Take all those ideas and now revisit the worst cases again. And you'll probably see there is a path where you don't end up destitute, even if it's not your ideal outcome. Super, super important, because now you can see that there's a way to get through things. Before, you're looking at it and your brain froze. Oh no, we're going to lose the house. We're going to be in the street. There's nothing we can do. So now you made a huge step. Now you're saying, well, we won't be in the street, but maybe we'll have to have your Aunt Mary live with us. You know, Still not a great thing that you're dying to do, but it's a path forward, and that changes how your brain works. Now your brain's kind of like, oh, so there's one solution, maybe there's more solutions. We talked about this before in the general sense, but this is for a very specific thing now. If your life situation changes, if you imagine that it changes, go through, look for ways you can solve it. Now you can start looking at all the trade-offs and figuring out how you want to live this next phase of your life in a way that seems reasonable. Again, this is all role playing in the future. If it happened, if it turns out your life situation changed recently, apply it now by all means. And if you have any questions, write me, give a comment, whatever. But I've gone through this in various times in various situations, and it actually just happened again a couple of days ago, slightly different. It wasn't a career change situation, it was a podcast change situation. Actually, I'll talk about that in 2 seconds as a bonus piece. But the immediate reaction is, oh my God, I'm going to be out of work. This is simple. I'm going to be replaced by an AI machine in this particular case. And it's kind of like, and I know what to do in those situations. It's kind of like, what are we going to do? We're going to wait till tomorrow and think about it overnight. That's what we're going to do. And so that's exactly what I did. And the next morning I got up and I listened to it again, and I thought, there's some things that are useful to take away from the way the AI did the podcast. It turns out this was using Google Notebook. I gave it the script for this podcast as the prompt, and it came back with two voices, a he and a she. And she starts off with a very dramatic statement and everything else. I'm looking at it, and my first year is kind of, wow, this catches your attention. It hooks people in, blah blah blah. Is that really better? And then I listened to it again. It's kind of like, and they missed almost not all, but many of the most important points of what we just talked about. And so, even when you think about something at first and it just seems unsolvable, again, give yourself some grace. Try and back off for a little while, an hour, rest of the day, till tomorrow, couple days. Don't put it totally out of your head, but let your mind mull on it a little bit, and it'll find a way to get through. So that's it for the evening. Please remember the many ways, many wars going on in the world, and we're just having a hurricane party right now. There's another one just passed through Mexico, heading to Florida again. It's just I have a feeling the rate they're going, it's going to be one of those seasons where they run out of letters and have to start over again, which is really unfortunate. So many people need your help in many different ways. There's ukr7.com, which are links to ways to help in Ukraine. There's worldcentralkitchen.org, wck.org. They probably will be working in some areas in hurricane relief, I would expect. There's many charities that have sprung up. Always be careful with those, obviously, but many reputable charities that have come up for the people in Asheville, North Carolina, and that whole region, the southeast United States. Wars in many places around the world, Ukraine, obviously, Israel and the Mideast, obviously, Africa. It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people can use some good thoughts and some good actions. So if you can, you're able to donate, that's great. If you want to donate locally, that's great. If you can't donate, just out of the donating frame of mind right now, that's great too. Because remember, you can always make a difference right in your immediate area. And it can be a little teeny difference in just something as small as a smile to somebody who looks down, just saying good morning to somebody. It doesn't have to be, hi, good morning, isn't it a great day? It's like, hey, how's it going? That's it. Just acknowledging that they're there and that they're a person and worth speaking to. Sometimes can just change somebody's whole day. Remember that one of the best ways to care for yourself is to care for others. So please try and do that. Look at the links. Look at all the many other places looking for aid. Just look at the world around you. As always, thank you for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along. And subscribe, hit that like button. Let me know what's going on. If you want to hear something else, drop me a comment. This is what you'd like to hear. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.